Thanks. Do you want to wait for a couple of minutes, Avisha? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the panel discussion on FOSS and education. My name is Anand. I work for FOSS United. As most of you already know, FOSS United is a not-for-profit organization started with the aim of promoting and nurturing free and open source software in India. India is a large country with so many developers. When we consume a lot of free and open source software, but our contributions to free and open software are not as much in that proportion. This panel discussion on FOSS and education would like to discuss about two things broadly. One, how can we use FOSS to make education more accessible to more people? Two, how can academia contribute to better FOSS ecosystem in India? So we have with us esteemed panelists. So let me start with introducing them. So we have with us Professor Pankaj Jalote. He's a distinguished professor at IIIT-Delhi. He was also founding director from 2008 to 2018. Recently has done very interesting course, software development using open source. And part of the coursework was to students to contribute to existing open source projects. So that was something very exciting, and we thought it's a course that maybe can be emulated in many other universities. We thought we would hear from him about his experience of doing that course. And we have Professor Prabhu Ramachandran. Prabhu is a professor at aerospace engineering in IIT Mumbai. He's a fellow of Python Software Foundation, author of Mayavi, a 3D visualization tool for scientific data in Python. He's also involved with the FOSS project to introduce free and open source software in engineering. Welcome, Prabhu. Yeah, and we have Professor Kannan Modgalaya from IIT Mumbai again. So Kannan is a professor in chemical engineering, systems control, and education technology at IIT Bombay. He is a member of standing committee of the National Mission for ICT, MHRD, Government of India. He is the principal investigator for the Spoken Tutorial project, where a lot of people have learned from that resource. So welcome, Professor Kannan. And we have S Madhusudan, CEO and co-founder of InCore Semiconductors. So Madhu has involved with the development of Shakti processor, an open source processor based on RISC-V technologies. Welcome, Madhu. So I think we have a diverse panelists have worked very closely with FOSS in different areas. So the format of this session is going to be we are going to I'm going to ask some questions to each of these panelists, and let's see. Let's hear from them. Okay. So, I'll start with Professor Kannan. Professor Kannan, you have been member of a standing committee for National Mission for ICT and very active in shaping the Spoken Tutorial project. Can you tell us more about the project, how successful it is, and then what more needs to be done in that?
First, I would like to correct. I'm no longer a member of the standing committee. I was there doing that for 5 years.
Okay.
So that
Sorry for that.
You're probably reading from the old profile, but it's okay.
Yeah.
The Spoken Tutorial project is still going on, and we have trained about 70 lakh students using that from various colleges. It's the main reason why we are able to train lots of people is we make the content suitable for self-learning. These are a spoken tutorial is a 10-minute long audio-video tutorial. It has a video component, but you don't see the face of the person who talks. You only hear their voice. So it is called spoken tutorial. We guarantee that it is suitable for self-learning by writing a script for every tutorial before recording it. and passing it through novice check. Novice has to certify that they can understand. Only then we record the tutorial. And then we dub the spoken part into all Indian languages. Video remaining in English so that people can use the normal computer, normal keyboard, but the instructions are in their mother tongue. We do this in all 22 languages. Even in Sanskrit, for example, that's one of the 22 languages. We have 300 tutorials dubbed already. We have, and then these are usable offline. So it is possible to download that and copy that into every machine so people can use them offline. So it became very useful during the pandemic. Of course, we do this only with open source software. Some interesting things are something we didn't anticipate. Because it is suitable for self-learning, we don't need any expert to conduct these workshops. Anybody can take it and say that this is the way to use the tutorials and we can learn. As a result, we found the students telling later that they learned by themselves. Nobody taught them. They learned by themselves. And so they are capable of learning. And that gave really a lot of confidence in them. And I believe that that is one of the reasons for the success of the project. So we have about 1,500 tutorials in English, including dubbing. We have about 15,000 tutorials.
That's looks quite incredible number in the size and also the impact it has. Thanks, Mr. Kannan. So, what more is kind of planned right now? Are you planning any improvements to that, or?
Yeah. So some things I remember quite some time ago. Some people asked, how do we convince people to use GCC, for example?
Yeah.
Okay, because people are using Turbo C. It turns out that, of course, we promote only GCC, including a Windows port of it, and we have trained a million students, 10 lakh students on GCC on C, using spoken tutorials. That means what the open source community was trying to do has been done through this without telling.
That's incredible. Yeah.
You have to use spoken tutorial. You have to have that installation. We tell how to install it, and it is free. We have been what we have done is we went for a subscription scheme. MHRD said that because this project is successful, whether we can raise the money ourselves, some money at least.
Okay.
So we came up with a method to collect 25,000 rupees per college per year. That will allow any number of students to appear in any number of tests. That is, the tutorials continue to be in Creative Commons license, CC BY SA, but only the online test offered by us, we said that if you are a part of that subscription scheme, then you can take it. There are some colleges in Hyderabad that have taken something like 1,500 certificates, for example, in a year. They paid 25,000 rupees. So the cost of a certificate is of the order of some 15, 16 rupees, something like that. So it's not very expensive. Interestingly, the number of people who complete the test increased threefold after that. Previously, when it was free, nobody bothered, and we used to request. We used to, please come and take it. It is useful, and so on. So that is one thing that has really, it's a good thing, because then people become more responsible. They give the money, they say, I want to get it done. There are some state governments that have come and said, take these 100 colleges, I'll pay you this money, and so on. So that is one thing that we have done. The other thing that we did was recently, of course, this has to be scaled up. We conducted a job fair for students who did well in the online tests. Okay. And initially I was thinking, what's the big deal about spoken tutorial test? But interestingly, when we conducted this interview with NASCOM, 10 companies came and 40 students came. 30 students got jobs, and in fact, they got a total of 59 offers. That means almost 2 jobs per person. Wow. And these students come from ordinary colleges, tier 2, tier 3 colleges, where there is no online on-campus placement. no campus placement. So these students, good students, have difficulty in finding jobs. Whereas small and medium scale companies also have difficulty because they have to go to 10 colleges maybe to recruit one person.
Yeah.
So I find this to be a useful platform. Hope to expand on this.
Yeah. Thanks. I think that looks like quite a positive news to hear. Thanks a lot for sharing it with us. Now, I want to ask Prabhu, that you're part of the FOSS project. Uh, so, so one of the things that we kind of see is programming is for software engineers, but computers and the free and open softwares tools are so much useful in actually engineering. So can you tell more about like what's a FOSS project and then how it was received when it's implemented?
Sure. Actually, I have to mention that Professor Kannan is has been the kind of prime mover even for FOSS in many regards.
Yeah, yeah. So
I hope that he will step in if I miss something out or something like that. So my entry into this role of FOSS, the project actually came in through a suggestion I think 10 years ago by Professor Kannan. He called a bunch of us in campus here, saying there's this opportunity that is out there. It's a government funded opportunity. It will be very good for us to get into. It's a good opportunity for us to spread the adoption of open source software. So that's when it started. I think 2009 it started. And since then, Professor Kannan has been kind of the biggest driving force in that. So I got in mainly from the Python side of things, which is what I tend to use for all of my research. So from there, we have expanded. I mean, initially started off with Scilab, Python, and some EDA tools. So basically things like KiCad, and so you can build your own circuit boards and things like that. And since then, it's actually expanded significantly into many open source packages. And we have also, because we are sort of co-located with the Spoken Tutorial project, there's an intimate exchange of ideas. That platform, we tend to use the Spoken Tutorial platform heavily. And a lot of cross-pollination of ideas among the various sub-projects inside the FOSS. So there's like Python, there's Scilab, there is OpenFOAM, which is a CFD solver package. There is the entire electronic design related tools, and for which we have actually contributed several packages which make it easy to facilitate. And then there is things like R, of course. Then there is a chemical process simulator called
DWSim.
DWSim.
DWSim. That electronics package is called eSIM. It's an alternative to PSpice, ORCAD, and things like that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the key thing here is there is because there are many of these projects, sort of not projects, I would say sub-projects which specialize on specific. Maybe you can say verticals or specific open source tools which cater to a particular segment of the education in India. Yeah. And because they're from the same parent project, we tend to reuse the same kind of approach. So one of the things that we've done is a lot of people in their labs would use MATLAB heavily. Even now, this is a big problem. So one thing was to actually take these labs, handhold them, and convert them into Scilab labs, so that they have completely open source lab and they eliminate the need for MATLAB. Because by and large, except if you're doing some very niche research, there's no need for specific MATLAB toolboxes. In addition, there has also been development work done, because MATLAB is kind of one of those big things which is extremely expensive. Say Python, for example, doesn't have something like that, where you're replacing something which is proprietary heavy. Whereas in MATLAB, it turns out that many of these colleges don't have that much funds, and they tend to take that money and put it into a MATLAB license. And people then get hooked into the tools like there's these UI-driven tools which people tend to use, for which we have an open source alternative that was also developed through the FOSS project, XCOS. So one thing is lab convergence. The second thing is, big problem with a lot of these open source contributions. One of the issues that I think we still struggle with, right? How does India contribute? Again, I think Professor Kannan came up with this very nice idea of taking existing textbooks. So let's say you have a standard, say fluid mechanics textbook or electrical circuits textbook, and they'll have a bunch of these solved problems. And these solved problems, they're just some simple formula, or maybe they solve a system of equations, or they do some symbolic manipulation, whatever it is. And for each of these, instead of saying there's no documentation available, what we did was we started this project called Textbook Companions, where you take a known textbook that's there in the syllabus, you pick it up, you take the solved example and solve it with some open source code, like Scilab, or like Python, or R, or whatever it is. Or so like that, we have like 500 plus textbooks with Scilab, which means the full textbook is available, and you can actually execute this online. So if you go to our FOSS.in, go to the Scilab website, you can actually find the full code. You may even find a PDF of make sure because they don't know GitHub, they don't know any of this. They know how to use Scilab, they know their textbook material, they know, they can solve this. So this was a nice strategy. So same way for Python also, we have them in the form of Jupyter notebooks. We have, again, 500 odd textbook companies. Now, obviously, you may say, the quality is, the code may not be some fantastic code. Yeah, obviously not. It's a trivial problems and things like that. But still, there are like so many examples, with plots and with the results, and with you have a reference point with a text. So this is another thing that is done. Similarly, workshops. Similarly, spreading the adoption of these tools through either spoken tutorials. So people can actually take a Scilab course or a Python course entirely through spoken tutorials if they want. They can also do it through other means. Okay? So we also have workshops that we conduct for Python, especially given the popularity of Python. We have tools. We try to make sure that we build a set of tools and a set of techniques such that more people can get involved. We also have something called summer internships. Everybody knows about summer internships, but we have a very interesting take on this as well, where the FOSS project basically floats several, based on all the open source packages that we look at. There'll be different groups, each of whom will mentor a set of students who basically either do a 6-month remote internship where they'll take up some open source package. That is another thing that happens. The other thing is we sponsor generic as sketches. It's extraordinary energy levels of some kind.
We did 4 or 5 hackathons. We did a Scilab toolbox hackathon in which people can take any open source software and make it available as a toolbox for Scilab. Okay. Scilab textbook companion, Prabhu said, we actually have 625 textbook companions, about 75,000 examples solved examples, but coded by students across the country. Maybe from about 1,000 students from 1,000 colleges, right? Yeah. Then we did a 3-minute Panchatantra animation hackathon. They can take any but they have a big studio. We have 2 weeks for the announcement, 3 minutes, and because there was a student, she said that she saw a specific studio she couldn't figure out. Then she saw spoken tutorials she could learn, and she actually created an animation. We did a mapathon using QGIS. That's also one of the promoted software. Yeah. 10,000 students participated. We wanted to create a district map of all districts in India. So that was done. We did that with ISRO and AICTE. And then eSIM hackathon we did. So these are some of the things that we did.
Yeah, so very interesting. I mean, I'm glad that invited all of you to kind of talk about it. I think generally, I think what I feel is like there is a academia and industry don't kind of meet each other anywhere, and so I mean, your work is in your own silos, and then industry doesn't even know that there is this kind of interesting things that are happening.
Actually, industry does know about Professor Kannan's many of his initiatives. I mean, he's been in touch with NASCOM.
Okay.
Yeah, so I you can accuse me of such a fault, but I think Professor Kannan cannot be. He is actually actively reaches out to not.
Yeah, great, good, very good to hear that. Okay, so so thanks. I think that's quite insightful. I hope some more such things. It reaches to more people and more books gets translated, and hope it will be more successful. So, kind of very good to kind of hear that. Okay, so one question on that is still. So we, I mean, even with all so much of efforts and having all of that, we still have many colleges where kids come out of final year without knowing anything, any programming or anything. I mean, what do you think is the reason? I mean, what can we do to solve that?
Are you asking me, Prabhu, or?
Yeah, I mean, any one of you. I mean.
I think since I've spoken, I will keep quiet.
No, one thing I can say is, so long as we ask questions like describe a compiler and things like that as a test in programming course, this will continue. Whereas, so Prabhu's team developed this examination system called Yaksh, through which people can their code can be tested. For example, they can write a function. Right? So we need to have a mechanism by which we say that unless you can write a code, you're not going to pass the programming course.
Yeah.
It may be a very simple thing. Let it be a 10-line, 20-line code. If people cannot write a working code, they should not pass. If you do that, then it'll happen. It doesn't have to be very complicated one. It is just that people don't have the confidence. They are used to mugging up. In fact, some people have told me that based on the answer book in an exam, one can find out what textbook people used.
Oh.
Okay, because it's all copy pasted.
Yeah. Cool. So I think I want to kind of move on to the second part of it, which is basically now. I mean, I really kind of didn't expect that there's so much FOSS work kind of happening in spoken tutorials. I mean, I knew that there were tutorials, but I didn't know like it was completely only FOSS and pushing people to kind of use FOSS tools, and that's really good to kind of hear that. Okay, so coming to my next question, right? I mean, so I want to kind of understand like how can academia contribute to better FOSS ecosystem in India? I think I want to ask first Pankaj because he has done this course recently, software development using open source software, right? So the students went and actually contributed to various open source projects as part of the course. So one thing that we usually find is a lot of students, they're usually good at algorithms or good at specific topics, but generally not good at overall software engineering in a practical sense, right? I mean, ability to work with other people, etc. And when I heard about this course, I felt like it's a wonderful course, and that course would have been there in every university, right? So I want to kind of understand what was the motivation for actually creating that course, and then how did it go, and what are the lessons learned in actually doing that course?
Right, sorry. Okay, so this course is more from the software development or engineering perspective, which I've taught earlier. So I actually came from a somewhat morally a neutral view towards FOSS, just to clarify, because FOSS has a very historically a moral reason for existence, actually. Though in the recent past it has just become has its own dynamics. And in fact, we know more than half the people who are working on FOSS are not. The test portion doesn't apply. They are paid people and so on. And so so my main thing is this: that FOSS is such the repository of wonderful software which is available for free, is so huge. There is just a gold mine out there, and we actually don't leverage it. Okay? In academia, in particular, in India also, we just don't leverage it. We know 80-90%, and I believe that number has gone up. Companies now use open source. It was not. But in the same time, in the software engineering thing, I realized that there are various technology stacks which make which make development of fairly complex applications fairly simpler or much simpler. So there are three dimensions that I looked at. One is there is this assets available there. Can we leverage them? Right. The second is open source. While each open source project is its own, they have their own processes, etc. Use all these to create software which can be open source. So in my course, I did not require it to be an open source. So we said we must use open source resources. I created a standardized, so to say, for the course purposes, a process which you should use. Of course, you then become familiar with open source technologies and all that other stuff in terms of usage tools and so on. And what you produce could be closed source. I don't particularly care. If it is somebody is generating, if it's somebody is getting value, I'm fine. But it could also be open source, right? So that's how it was. So I was looking at essentially harnessing the power of open source, which I think we don't harness enough of, right? And separately, unlocking the value, using the value. And hopefully, in that process, more contribution will happen naturally without making that as the goal.
So, I mean, at least like having giving credits for people to kind of contribute to other software, I thought that's an innovative idea. So it's quite interesting to kind of see that. Okay. I think Professor Prabhu has some comments.
Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to add that actually, when we started FOSS, we started a course in IIT Mumbai. It's a registered course. It's AE 663, which is software development for engineers and scientists.
Wow. Okay.
It's very nice to see that others are, there are other courses as well. That was also a lot inspired, or a lot of things were inspired by software carpentry. So if you're not, I don't know if you've heard of software carpentry.
Yeah. In fact, one of my questions next coming up was software carpentry. But
okay. Yeah. So in fact, one of the main creators, Greg Wilson, in fact, bumped into him in 2010 or something.
Yeah.
So basically, we created a course here, which again covers. There, the emphasis was more like, if you look at the average engineer, they just do a CS 101 course, and then they're thrown into this company which does software. So they have absolutely no idea. They don't know about Git. They don't know version control. Forget Git. I mean, they don't know any version control. The way they write their codes is the version 1.c, 1.2.c, and that's how they start. They don't know any shell scripting. They learn typically C or C++. They don't know. Like test-driven development is like they have no idea about testing. They don't know how to do continuous integration. So the goal of the course was to teach them okay, how do you write reports with LaTeX. So the goal was to give them this basic set of tools on software development tools, and how do you take your project and maybe use these these tools to do your science or your engineering better. So that final projects could be they could contribute to an open source project, but very few would do that. most people will take their BTech project or whatever, master's project or PhD project and try to use the tools, apply it to that. So we did try this, but there are internal difficulties with having to run such a course because no department wants to own that course, in the sense that I don't get much credit for teaching an elective. It's a lot of work to teach such an elective, and there are other courses that I have to do in aerospace engineering. So it's very difficult to find time to teach something like that.
So I think there are a couple of threads I want to kind of open on that, but I think I'll first go with Madhu and can come back. So I also want to kind of hear about the ecosystem of hardware and kind of processor ecosystem, right? I mean, Madhu, you have been involved in the Shakti processor and also running company based on similar technologies. So could you tell more about like how that ecosystem has been and yeah.
I actually started with the software ecosystem. I'm actually a software guy by training.
Okay.
But since I'm a systems architecture guy, I kind of wandered from operating systems into processors. So I've been working on open source software since about 1985.
Wow.
4.2 BSD. I started my career building 4.2 BSD systems. So all I know is open source systems going back 3.5 decades now. The hardware ecosystem was there even in the mid 90s. In fact, I started playing around with Alliance and stuff that Indra had started, but that never took off. Partly because the hardware ecosystem is very complex, right? It's only now that you have reasonably large FPGAs where you can try something out. Otherwise, even if you write open source hardware, how do you fabricate it? How do you test it? All of that is a problem. So with the advent of affordable FPGAs, we started an open source processor project in IIT when I joined IIT Madras in 2012. I actually joined to do work in secure operating systems, but then we started a processor project also based on PowerPC. Then the RISC-V guys came along, we joined forces with them, started the consortium, and the rest is kind of history. Hardware is still very immature compared to the software ecosystem for the simple reason that even though there's so much of hardware repositories out there, contribution is minimal to non-existent. Partly because to build a processor is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of engineering involved, right? You can write a small Python script and that's still open source, but if you want to do like a multiplier or a divider and optimize it, it requires a lot more of background knowledge. But having said that, even in InCore, we have had interns doing processor design 11th, 12th standard. So there are kids out there. So there is nothing that prevents people. It's more of a, but courtesy RISC-V, courtesy a lot of other open standards, the hardware ecosystem is definitely accelerating. I think the RISC-V ecosystem will pretty much take over the processor industry by the end of the decade or early 2030 and stuff. It's tough to hold it back, right? You get pretty much everything that you want. So a lot of those things come. I'm still skeptical about a huge hardware ecosystem coming because contributors are very, very rare. If you look at people contributing to Shakti or the commercial version that is from InCore or the Berkeley, all of that, right? I doubt whether there are more than 1,000, 2,000 contributors around the world. And I don't foresee that increasing because processes are very deep inside. But where I see contributions coming in is things like AML accelerators, with FPGAs becoming more popular so that it gets more of a software flavor. For example, if Google Home speakers are more FPGA driven, FPGAs have to come down in cost to get a device. Colleges, we are evangelizing, talking to people, taking it. We're doing our best, but it's an uphill battle. part of the reason very few mentors. I mean, how many processor architects can you find in the country who can mentor you? But we'll get there. We'll lack software by a decade or two.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to kind of see this kind of initiative coming out from India, right? I mean, I think it's long due from quite some time. I would say there's so many people working on so many technologies, but having an open source hardware system coming out was really kind of really nice.
That's the key, right? It's a complete open source ecosystem. A complete RISC-V verification suite called River Code, completely written in Scratch by InCore and contributed to open source. You can verify any complex RISC-V processor with that. That's completely open source. So that is our contribution. The compliance suite for the RISC-V consortium is also contributed in open source by InCore.
Wow.
So if you look at any verification compliance, all of its contributions are from India. This is the first contribution that I know of where from ground up critical open source projects have been written in India and contributed. So anybody who ships a RISC-V processor anywhere in the world has to use Indian software to validate and claim.
Very impressive.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So, so one thing that I want to kind of ask in general is, right, when we're talking about software carpentry and other things, right? Okay. So one is like, I think coming back to the courses, like even like Pankaj mentioned, I think we're talking really about not just open source, but a modern development practices, to kind of put it that way, right? So what I feel is academia is not what to say embracing the modern development practices in general across the country. Okay, even when you look at the premier institutes, people see their job is doing research and publishing papers. Even use version control, right? But they want to run it. They have people who actually run it every time they run, and they, like you said, version 1, version 2 with the date file names. Okay, and this, I mean, if this is what's happening at the premier institutions, I mean, you can imagine what's going to be status at the tier 2 and tier 3 institutions, right? So, I mean, what do you think is the reason for this? And see, I mean, at one end, we actually have people. I mean, some of you talking about really amazing things about introducing open source, even to make cartoons, etc. At one end, right? And we're getting like world-class processors and other things from one end, and the other end, you actually have in the same institute, people are not even using like 1/10 of the modern practices that we're talking here, right? So what is the problem, and then how do you fix this gap?
If I may,
yeah, please.
First of all, let's not take a very narrow lens that if you don't do FOSS, you're not doing education.
That's why I'm very careful. Said like modern development practices. I didn't say FOSS, right? I said modern development practices. Okay.
I know. Till there are only few people doing it. Yet lots of good institutions are producing lots of good engineers. They may not know Git or source code, but they still, so it's a much bigger thing. Having said that, right? All I'm saying is, let's always, when it comes to education, you should never, ever lose a holistic perspective. But I'm with you. Don't get me wrong. I would much rather introduce. But now coming to about academia contribution.
Yeah.
But let's also look at, if you see open source from, a lot of big projects in open source didn't come out from academia. Not necessarily, right? Linux didn't come out of academia. Berkeley did, etc. And there are so I think there is a broader cultural question. That is, we don't, as people in general, think that we ought to contribute. I'm doing my day job. Then I come on Saturday and contribute to volunteer for a free software. That's not culturally in our genes, right? Which is what a lot of engineers used to do. Now, as I said, now more than half of the engineers working in open source are paid engineers. But before it was 90% volunteers. And we know that the studies have shown they would put 10, 12 hours a week and all that kind of stuff. Right? So there is a larger culture. Now, having said that, I'm not trying to take the blame away from us. In academia, just like in every sphere, you have a certain objective. I, as a professor, has a certain objective. Open source may fit into it, may not fit into it. And that's as simple as that, right? It so happens Prabhu is in Aero, but still has made, as he said, right? I mean, he's made open source into his scheme of things, but most of his colleagues don't, and you can't blame them for, hey, look, you're not doing it. In my own institute, almost no, except maybe 2-3 of us, we are in computer science. Kannan knows that also. So I think let's just respect everyone has their own goals. It's doing it, but I think I would lay it as a broader cultural, I don't know what you would call it, people issue, that we don't feel that then also do something, which or
not open source. That's not mine is actually saying that the source is open source, but it's really not something that people can take and use and contribute back. Yeah,
can I add something in?
Yeah, please.
Please, Madhu.
Go ahead. See, I've been railing against this for like about 2-3 decades now, right? See, fundamentally, there's something wrong with the engineering education in the sense that, one, we have taken away the joy of engineering. I'm a third-generation engineer. My grandfather was an engineer. My dad was one. I'm one. I'm the 15th guy in my family to get an engineering.
Wow.
Right? So, and people far more qualified. There are at least one billionaire in the family who made money out of doing startups and stuff and all that. So I'm relatively a failure compared to the rest of things. But one thing you're taught is the joy of engineering. Even if you're an 18-year-old, the pump doesn't work, grandpa will handle your pipe and say, go to the shop, get an O-ring, fix it. Otherwise, you can't have a bath, right? Engineering is inherently practical. It's if you look at the MIT logo, it's actually that convection had. And I'll tell you, in spite of the classes get over at 4, right? What's the point if you don't give lab access in computer science and electrical engineering? So, practical engineering, as you pointed out, is key. We have lost sight of that. It's not about open source or FOSS and stuff, as Professor Pankaj pointed out. It is how you engineer systems that is no longer there at the core of our teaching. We need to get that back. If you ask me to do a computer science course, I'll say you'll graduate only if you.
By the way, never was, Madhusudan.
It never was.
We've always been very theoretical in our education.
Oh, I love theory. I love formal verification. I work in type systems.
Add on to it, but I'm saying ever since I was a student, so Final grads are pretty powerful creatures. You got a job in Morgan Stanley and stuff, you can't resist the pressure, right? I mean, if I were running a computer science curriculum course, I'll say, look, you have to enhance one relational database, one compiler,
one operating system and one file system. And unless you improve performance by 5% in each of these, you don't graduate. I don't care if you're going to sit here for 20 years, right? Fix the damn thing. Minimum quota of 100,000 lines of original code in the third and fourth year. Theory automatically will come. You teach the practical first, then do the theory. I mean, you teach red, black trees in abstract, the kid gets bored.
From 5 lakh graduates, we will fall to 50 graduates a year.
That's how we do. Why do you need so many engineers? Turns out 2 lakh, 3 lakh engineers.
Ask the industry, they need to hire 200,000 a year.
A Japanese friend of father's back in 1955 told HAL, you should not be hiring so many engineers. Engineers are supposed to enhance. You basically need factory foreman to run your factory. A diploma guy is more than sufficient. Not that guy is any lesser, right? It's a different kind of thing. Yeah. So you have to define what an engineer is. The root of the problem is there. It's a cultural problem, as Professor Pankaj pointed out. We can't change it.
So, okay, so I have a slightly different take. So firstly, I think software is the least of our problems. You look at our math education. You're still taught 18th century mathematics. You don't get taught beautiful things like, differential forms. Why do you get taught that? You have to come, finish PhD, become faculty, make time for yourself, read, and then, math is beautiful.
And we are taught not to enjoy math, but to appreciate how difficult it can be.
Yeah, and drop out, right? And every innovation now is going to require math. But you don't teach math. And what is the math? See, then look at CS. I'm going to take a pot shot at CS. Please don't mind me. You look at CS. What are we being taught? You have one CS 101 course. How is that going to be enough? It's like just not enough. So people don't know how to think. They don't know, okay, hey, I can break this problem down this way. SICP, forget about it. Many people, they have no clue about.
When you get time, Prabhu, look at our this thing. Every program gets a certain amount of coding this thing. I made sure that coding is heart of every program.
Right.
Because computing is the new physics.
No, my point is the reason this is a problem is the focus has shifted from instead of being worried about, okay, I want to train the next generation of engineers or whatever it is we're trying to change, we are becoming paper producing machines, right? So you're supposed to say, I have to teach 2 courses to fulfill my quota, checkbox. I have to publish 5 papers or whatever, N papers or whatever this year. I have to get so many grants. So it's like, where is there time for someone to say, I don't care. I want to teach the best possible syllabus. I'm going to, rejigger all the courses in IIT Bombay. That's a fool's errand, right? I will not even have a job in most modern IIT, ISC. You will not make tenure, basically, right? So the system is engineered in such a way that, look, it's like, it's become this sort of, okay, you become this mass-produced thing. So it takes a lot of effort. You have to go against the grain. You have to say, look, I don't care. Fire me, do whatever it is. I'm going to go do what I want to do or what I think is right. That, unfortunately, there's going to be very few people who can, and you can't make a big change in the system. So these are kind of the answers.
We are not taught. You look at we don't appreciate beauty in engineering.
Marvel of evolution, if I may, please.
Yeah. I mean, we are nowhere near creating a cockroach. What the hell are you talking about artificial intelligence and stuff like that? Right? You can't replicate a simple ant. Look at the amount of material that goes into an ant. It's frugal engineering that we probably won't reach for the next 500 years. You need to teach that joy of engineering. This is the land of Saraswati. I don't think we appreciate it.
So if I may just suggest something to FOSS community, while contribution, etc. is of course good, I think things resonate more with our established system that you can get out of if you can convey as I said back, and the pyramid at the lowest, at the largest bottom level is users. Actually, that's how FOSS is earned, right? You have the core contributors, and at the end are this, and they'll migrate to becoming bug finders, and some of them will migrate to become contributors, etc. Right? So I think we are talking about, let's find engineers who are contributing, etc., which is a good thing. These are not either or. But if we can go to this pyramid where the users are big, we know through the past history and data analysis that some of them will migrate and reach there. And that is where I suspect the resonance with a lot of people may be better. You will do whatever you want to do, your job better, you can do your research better, you can do your student projects better, you can do X, Y, Z.
Students is one thing, right? But also in the faculty, I mean, who are actually creating open source software with the government funding and creating these things and the publishing stuff, right? I mean, so that also is now part of their grant, what they're getting, etc., right? Okay. So what I'm trying to say is like they're not able to follow modern practices. I think it's not part of the culture somehow in the academia. And the reason I'm kind of saying it is I think that culture is kind of downstream coming to students, and also they also kind of don't value open source and the modern practices, etc. Right? I want to kind of hear from you, right, as insiders, like how do you see that? Okay.
Yeah,
I understand students may have other priorities.
I believe that one of the things, of course, things have improved significantly now. But when I started doing open source, I found that it was actually very difficult. The community was such that they will start saying things like, "Oh, don't do top-up posting, bottom-up posting," and then first you do it properly, then they'll say it is already answered. Go and check. So, this is, beginners have to spend we should understand 99% of the people are beginners. So we have to take them, we have to help them. Okay. That has improved quite a bit. In fact, I fashioned spoken tutorial as a friendly interface between experts and beginners. It has to pass. Novice check means what? And who does that? An expert has to do that. Okay. So we have to make it a lot more friendly. And people want to be a part of a successful project. So if you, the moment you see a certain amount of momentum, then it, gathers and it goes on. So just because somebody is a faculty member doesn't mean that he or she is a, ace programmer and, things like that. I'm talking about, because computer science is one, of course, people say computer science people actually don't code. Okay. It is the other people, other engineers who do the coding, and they are not, as Prabhu pointed out, at the most they might do one course. They are taught how to, even in that course, how to find the sum of a series by expansion. Okay. They don't learn about, all these nice things, how to do, write a driver and then check it and then version control and so on. We don't have time. And also, even if a computer science department is willing to do that, do you think engineering departments or science departments will permit that? They have their own courses to teach. They'll say, no, you teach one course. In that teach programming, you also teach Newton's method. You also teach differential equations. How can they teach good programming? Not possible. So I think the way it is structured, it is not going to happen. We have to make it friendlier. We have to make it something aspirational, that they want to do this. Until we do that, we will not have lots of people participating. That's what I think.
So I think, I think we have 5 more minutes. I'll just see if there are any questions from anywhere. I don't think there are any questions. I'm just asking, check if there are any questions there. So I think it's really very interesting conversation to kind of understand, I mean, from different dimensions. I'm really glad that I was able to kind of get all of you together to kind of have this conversation.
Anand, I want to add one thing. You
Sure, please.
asked at the beginning, what is spoken tutorial doing?
Yeah.
One of the things we found was, I thought was IT skills was only the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Why don't we teach other skills also through spoken
Yeah.
tutorials? We experimented with health and nutrition tutorials.
Okay.
In fact, we created, I worked with a pediatrician
Okay.
and then came up with a set of tutorials on breastfeeding.
Okay.
Okay, that is for a newborn, right?
Okay.
It turns out that wherever we went and conducted is the time that people spend on the job should come down. Right? For example, you say you have created a programmer. Should they not start coding from the day they go to, let's say, TCS or Infosys, maybe with some coding? Why is it they spend 6 months to train these people? So this is happening in every sector. It could be in machine tools, it could be mechanical engineer, chemical engineer, and so on and so forth. Is it not possible for us to come up with, I have nothing against the theory and so on, we must teach theory, because if colleges don't teach theory, who is going to teach? But along with that, is it not possible for us to create these so that this person, I was working with, in fact, I came across this when I was working with Dr. Thomas Alexander of STEMI in Coimbatore. So he was saying that he was looking for engineers or diploma people who would manage the ECG system. Okay, in an ambulance, this fellow will take the ECG and send it across before the patient reaches the hospital. The doctors will know exactly what to do. Unfortunately, there's nobody who knew how to run the ECG system. So they would get this person trained and then train for 6 months on the job, and then that person would leave. So I said, why don't you create tutorials and flood the market and let people learn on the day one, they have to demonstrate. So this has to be done for, I think academia has a role in this, but industry also can take the help. But it is possible, at least in the skills area, it is possible. Of course, we validated this through IT skills, and that method is available. That's another
yeah. So very interesting. I mean, very. Anything else like any one of you want to add?
I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So I think there's one question from audience I want to take. Okay. So do you see systematic changes in academia coming in slowly, or do you think that we're still far away from allowing faculty that much freedom?
What's the question again?
Yeah. So the question is about allowing the freedom that faculty has in these institutions. The question is, Kaustubh is asking, do you see systematic changes in academia coming in slowly, or do you think we're still far away from allowing faculty that much freedom? I think he's talking about, I think Prabhu has mentioned that there's so many things that faculty has to do, and you kind of becoming people making machines kind of thing, right? I think it's related to that. So, are we kind of moving towards a system where the faculty get more freedom to kind of do this kind of experiments?
So I'll just quickly say that because my name was pulled up. I think in the IITs, there's a lot of freedom. So if I really want to do something, I can. It's total freedom. I have never anything against the IIT system for that. So it's a great place to do that in IIT. Yes, this is possible in IIT. Outside of IIT, I'm not so sure.
But let's just understand, first of all, structurally. I'm sure all of us do. Only about 10% of the education happens in what is called autonomous institutions, like IITs and us being at the apex, who have the necessary structural and academic and freedom to be able to design courses, etc. actually speaking, 80% plus happens in affiliated colleges where structurally they do not have abilities to design courses, new courses, or alter the contents of the courses, right? So it is not about academic. It requires a major change. Now, just to point out, because I did some study for a book from NEP, NEP theoretically talks about these things. It talks about many good things about giving complete autonomy to institutions like IITs, including selection of directors. It talks about doing away with affiliated systems. So at least theoretically there is talk. I personally am not, what do you say, fully convinced that either the bureaucracy or whoever has kept this kind of control on academic for so long is going to give it up so easily. But at least structurally that is allowed. After that, it's a long road ahead. By the way, you can't just somebody 80-90% of the people who are used teachers who are used to just teaching a syllabus given handed out to them, which doesn't change for 10-20 years at a row. Just because the laws change, suddenly they will become dynamic, creating new stuff in their courses, new courses is not going to happen. But that journey will at least start there. Hopefully, if it happens.
Thanks. I think it's quite insightful. I think there's one last question I'll take and stop here. Ashu Singh is asking, is it good to introduce programming and playing with Arduino in school? Anyone want to answer that?
Yes and no. You got to be careful, right? You need to let a kid play. So if you think of it just the way a kid plays with a toy, yes, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Right? But if you kind of make it too structured, you're robbing the kid of its creativity. You can do it, but a really good school can pull it off. I suspect most schools can't.
That's, I think, very nice answer. Yeah. Thanks, Red. I think we're already out of our scheduled time.
Anand, I want to add one other
Please.
thing.
Yeah.
Because this is something that academia can contribute.
Yeah.
There are many universities that specifically mention commercial software as a part of their syllabi. As Pankaj pointed out, it is the moment university says that all affiliated colleges have to fall in line. They cannot change.
Yeah.
They should see vice chancellors. Everybody should, we should go after them and say, don't put MATLAB. Don't say computational software. Or right at the beginning, you say, I might mention some commercial software, doesn't matter. Any equivalent open source software is okay.
Or an alternative commercial software.
Yeah, they should say that. If they say that, in fact, there is another very interesting thing that we should be aware of. AICTE at least used to do that. That every college should say that I have so many buses and okay, and was used there. What do they mean? Don't use pirated software. Colleges GNU is a license.
Yeah, it's a license.
BSD is a license.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? Open source software has license, right?
Yeah.
In fact, of course, I mean,
there are 100 plus open source licenses.
Yeah, it becomes very, and they say that you should have 20 copies. What is 20 copies? I can have 20,000 copies, 20 million copies, right? And of course, there are very interesting things. What is it? One bus equals 10 professors. Okay, one bus means so many points. One professor means so many points. So it's all point system. They have to add up and so on. But this is something that we should say. Wherever we get an opportunity, tell them, don't mention commercial software. If you say commercial software, it's okay. But any other equivalent software, whether it is open source or commercial, it doesn't matter, right? That is something that I think academia should do.
Yeah, I think very sorry for kind of keeping you a little longer. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. I mean, it's been a wonderful session. It turned out to be much more entertaining and exciting than what I thought it to be. Thank you so much for all the insights that you've shared. Thank you so much. I'll be in touch with each one of you and probably want to get on some of the session with you at some other point. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great. Thanks. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
Nice meeting.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.